She saved her boss from a bar fight. The next day, he gave her an envelope and said, "Don't open until—" Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. The fist came fast, aimed straight at the expensive suit. Sarah Miller saw it before the man in the tailored navy jacket did. She'd been wiping down the scarred oak bar at the Rusty Anchor for the past 6 years, long enough to recognize the signs. The drunk patron, Danny Murphy, had been nursing his resentment along with his whiskey for the better part of an hour. And now, the well-dressed stranger who'd walked in seeking, what? Anonymity? Escape. He was about to pay for the crime of looking too composed, too untouchable, too different from everyone else in this corner of Chicago. The stranger froze. Not the kind of freeze that came from quick thinking or strategy. Sarah had seen enough bar fights to know the difference. This was the freeze of a man whose body had betrayed him, whose mind screamed move, but whose muscles simply would not obey. She didn't think. Thinking was a luxury she'd given up at age 10, the night her father came home drunk and her mother didn't come home at all. Sarah grabbed the empty beer bottle nearest her hand, cracked it hard against the bar's edge, and the sharp sound cut through the tension like a knife through butter. "Murphy!" Her voice carried the kind of authority that came from raising a 9-year-old son alone, from working double shifts, from learning young that if she didn't fight, nobody else would. Out. Now. The broken bottle wasn't a weapon. She'd never actually use it. But Danny Murphy didn't know that, and the other patrons didn't need to know that. What mattered was the fierce certainty in her eyes, the way she held her ground between the drunk and his target, her body language broadcasting a simple message, "Not in my bar." Murphy swayed, his bloodshot eyes narrowing. For a heartbeat, Sarah wondered if tonight would be the night someone actually called her bluff. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hand stayed steady. "You're defending this rich jerk," Murphy slurred. "I'm defending my bar," Sarah said, her voice low and calm. "The place where nobody hurts nobody. Remember, that's the rule. You broke it. Leave." Something in her tone, or maybe the growing crowd of regulars who'd stood up from their tables, made Murphy reconsider. He spat on the floor, muttered something crude, and stumbled toward the door. Sarah didn't move until she heard it slam behind him. Only then did she turn to look at the stranger. He was still frozen, his grey eyes wide with something that looked like shame, mixed with disbelief. Up close, she could see he was older than she'd first thought. Maybe early 40s, with silver threading through dark hair at his temples, the kind of distinguished look that came with corner offices and country clubs. "You all right?" she asked, setting the broken bottle carefully into the trash bin. His voice caught. He cleared his throat. "Yes. Thank you." And thank you." Sarah nodded and turned back to the bar, grabbing a clean rag. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline catching up with her. She needed to finish her shift. She needed to pick up Ethan from Rita's apartment. She needed to not think about the fact that she'd just risked her job, maybe her safety, for a stranger who probably wouldn't remember her name by morning. "Can I pay you?" he asked suddenly. Sarah's back stiffened. She turned slowly, the rag still in her hand, and looked at him with eyes that had seen too much to be impressed by money. "Pay me for what?" For helping, I didn't do it for money." Her tone was flat, final. "I did it because that's what decent people do. They help when someone needs help." His face flushed. "I didn't mean to insult you. I just thought—" "I know what you thought." Sarah cut him off, not unkindly, but firmly. "You thought I'm a bartender. I must need money, so throw some bills at the problem and everyone goes home happy. But I don't save people for tips, mister. I do it because it's right." She watched something shift in his expression. Embarrassment, yes, but also something deeper. Recognition, maybe, or respect. "I'm Lucas," he said quietly. "Lucas Blackwood. Sarah." She didn't offer her last name. Didn't need to. "Thank you, Sarah. Truly." He pulled out his wallet and she tensed, ready to refuse again, but he only placed a 20 on the bar for the single beer he'd barely touched. "I should go." She watched him leave, his shoulders carrying the weight of something heavier than his expensive coat, and she told herself that was the end of it. Rich man wanders into wrong bar, gets saved by bartender with more courage than sense, goes back to his glass tower and never thinks about it again. Sarah finished her shift, locked up, and walked the 6 blocks to Rita's apartment to collect Ethan. The October wind bit through her jacket, but she barely noticed. Her mind kept replaying that moment, the way Lucas Blackwood had simply frozen, not from cowardice, exactly, something else, something broken. But that wasn't her problem. She had enough of her own. The next morning started like every other morning. Sarah made oatmeal for Ethan, reminded him 3 times to brush his teeth, checked his backpack for the inhaler that cost more than her weekly paycheck, and walked him to the bus stop. She kissed the top of his head, breathed in the scent of his strawberry shampoo, and felt the familiar ache in her chest. This boy was her entire world. Everything she did, every double shift, every moment of bone-deep exhaustion was for him. "Love you, Mom," Ethan said, grinning up at her with a gap-toothed smile. "Love you more, baby." She watched the bus pull away, then headed back to their studio apartment to grab her things for the lunch shift at the Anchor. But when she turned onto their street, she stopped short. A black town car idled in front of her building. Not the kind of car that belonged in this neighborhood. Not the kind that brought good news. Sarah's first instinct was to turn around, to avoid whatever trouble was coming. But trouble had a way of finding her anyway, so she lifted her chin and kept walking. The back door of the car opened. Lucas Blackwood stepped out, and Sarah's stomach dropped. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice sharper than she'd intended. "I needed to talk to you. I called the bar. They said you weren't working until noon, so I—" He trailed off, seeming to realize how this looked. "I'm sorry. This is intrusive. I should have waited." "Yeah, you should have." Sarah crossed her arms. "What do you want?" He held out a thick manila envelope, a job offer and something else. Sarah didn't reach for it. "I have a job." "I know. But I run a consulting firm, Blackwood Consulting, and I need someone who can navigate real-world situations, someone who understands people, not just spreadsheets, someone with your instincts." "My instincts?" Sarah couldn't help the bitter laugh. "You mean someone who knows how to handle drunks and break up fights?" "I mean someone who has courage when it counts." His grey eyes held hers, and there was no condescension in them, only sincerity. The position would pay $75,000 a year, with full health benefits, including coverage for dependents. Sarah's breath caught. 75,000. Health insurance for Ethan. His asthma medication without the crushing co-pays. Specialist appointments she could actually afford. But nothing in life came free. She'd learned that lesson early and hard. "What's the catch?" she asked. Lucas gestured to the envelope. "Open it when you get inside. Read the offer. There's also a sealed envelope inside. That one. Don't open it yet." "Why not?" "Because it comes with a condition." He met her gaze steadily. "Don't open it until the moment you realize you don't have to fight alone anymore." Sarah stared at him. "That's the strangest thing anyone's ever said to me." "I know." A small, sad smile crossed his face. "But when you open it, if you open it, you'll understand why." He turned to get back in the car, then paused. "The job offer is real, no strings. You'd report Monday if you accept. The other envelope is separate. Completely your choice." The car pulled away, and Sarah stood on the sidewalk holding the envelope like it might explode. Inside her apartment, she sat at the tiny kitchen table and opened it with shaking hands. The job offer was typed on expensive letterhead, External Logistics Coordinator, 75,000 annual salary, health, dental, vision insurance, coverage starting immediately for employee and dependents, and beneath the paperwork, sealed with red wax like something from another century, was a second envelope. Thick, heavy, mysterious. Don't open until you realize you don't have to fight alone anymore. What kind of man did that? What kind of game was this? Sarah's first instinct was to refuse it all. Pride made her want to rip up the papers and throw them away. But then she thought of Ethan, struggling to breathe during an asthma attack last month, thought of the medical bills stacked on her counter, thought of her son asking, once, if they were poor, and she told him no, baby, we're rich in love. But love didn't pay for inhalers. She shoved the sealed envelope into the back of her kitchen drawer and stared at the job offer. 1 weekend to decide. 1 weekend to choose between pride and practicality. By Sunday night, Sarah had made her choice. She called the number on the letterhead and left a message. This is Sarah Miller. I accept the position. I'll be there Monday morning. She told herself it was just a job, just money to help Ethan, nothing more complicated than that. But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the water-stained ceiling of her apartment, she couldn't stop thinking about the sealed envelope in her drawer. And she couldn't shake the feeling that opening it would change everything. Monday morning arrived too fast. Sarah stood in front of the glass tower that housed Blackwood Consulting, wearing the only professional outfit she owned, borrowed from Rita 3 years ago for a job interview she hadn't gotten. The black pants were a little loose, the white blouse a little tight, and she felt like a child playing dress-up in someone else's life. The lobby was all marble and chrome, the kind of space that echoed with the footsteps of people who belonged. Sarah didn't belong. She knew it with every fiber of her being, but she was here. And she didn't run from things, even when every instinct screamed at her to turn around. Sarah Miller, the receptionist, a polished woman in her 30s with a nameplate that read Jennifer, smiled warmly. Mr. Blackwood said to send you right up when you arrived. 42nd floor. The elevator ride felt like ascending into another world. Through the glass walls, Chicago spread out below, morning light glinting off the lake in the distance. Sarah had lived in this city her whole life, but she'd never seen it from this angle. Up here, everything looked clean and possible. Down there, in her neighborhood, everything was just hard work and survival. The doors opened directly into a reception area that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than her car, and Lucas Blackwood, standing near a massive desk, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Sarah, welcome." He extended his hand and she shook it, noting the calluses were in different places than hers, pen calluses, not work calluses. "Let me show you around." The tour was overwhelming. Conference rooms with tables that could seat 20, a break room that looked like a high-end cafe, office after office filled with people who looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine spread on success. And then there was Margaret Whitmore. She emerged from a corner office, grey hair pulled back in a severe bun, pearls at her throat, eyes that assessed and dismissed Sarah in a single glance. "Lucas, is this the new coordinator?" The pause before coordinator spoke volumes. "Margaret, this is Sarah Miller." "Sarah, Margaret is one of our senior board members." "How refreshing," Margaret said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "To have someone so grounded in reality join our team." Sarah heard the condescension beneath the words. Grounded, reality, code for not our kind. "Thank you," Sarah replied evenly, refusing to show the sting. "I look forward to contributing." Margaret's smile tightened before she swept away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume. Lucas led Sarah to her office, a space with actual walls and a door, and a view of the city that made her throat tight. "Don't mind Margaret," he said quietly. "She's protective of the firm's image. She thinks I don't belong here." Sarah turned from the window to face him. "She's not wrong. I don't. You belong anywhere you choose to be." Lucas's voice carried unexpected steel. "You saved me from a bar fight without hesitation. That takes more real courage than anything these people do behind their desks." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her armor, her walls, but something in his eyes stopped her. He meant it. He actually believed she had value beyond her ability to scrub bar tops and dodge drunk customers' advances. "Why me?" she asked. "Really? You could hire anyone." "Because everyone else would have walked away." Lucas held her gaze. Or worse, they would have called security and watched from a safe distance. "You stepped between me and danger without thinking about the cost. That kind of instinct, that kind of heart, it can't be taught." Before Sarah could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and grimaced. "I have to take this. Get settled. We'll meet this afternoon to go over your responsibilities." The week passed in a blur of learning new systems, meeting colleagues who ranged from genuinely welcoming to politely suspicious, and trying not to feel like an imposter every time she walked through that glass lobby. By Friday, Sarah was exhausted in a different way than bartending had ever made her. Physical exhaustion, she understood. This mental and emotional fatigue from constantly proving she deserved to be in spaces that weren't made for people like her. That was new. Friday evening. She was packing up her desk when Lucas appeared in her doorway. "Do you have plans tomorrow?" he asked. Sarah's guard went up immediately. "Why?" "I'm working this weekend, which I know is terrible, but that's the reality. And I thought, you mentioned your son, right? If you need to bring him, that's fine. The office is empty on Saturdays. He could, I don't know, watch movies in the conference room or something." Sarah's first instinct was to refuse, to keep her world separate. Ethan belonged to the part of her life that was real and warm, and hers. This place, this glass tower, it belonged to survival and paychecks and not belonging. But she'd promised Ethan they'd spend Saturday together, and Rita couldn't watch him this weekend. And the truth was, Sarah couldn't afford to say no to Lucas Blackwood, not yet. Not until she had some savings built up, some security. "Okay," she heard herself say, "I'll bring him." Saturday morning, Ethan's eyes went wide as they walked into the empty office building. "Mom, this is like a spaceship." Sarah laughed despite her nerves. "Kind of, yeah." Lucas was already at his desk, surrounded by papers and multiple computer screens. He looked up when they entered, and something softened in his expression. "You must be Ethan." "Yes, sir." Ethan had his shy voice on, the one he used with teachers and strangers. "I'm Lucas. Your mum works with me." He stood and walked over, crouching down to Ethan's level, not towering over him, but meeting him eye to eye. Sarah's breath caught at the gesture. Most adults didn't bother. "I hear you're 9. 9.5, Ethan corrected automatically, then blushed. "Sorry." "Don't be sorry. Half years matter when you're 9.5. They matter less when you're 42.5, but at your age, absolutely crucial." Lucas grinned, and Ethan giggled. Sarah felt something crack open in her chest, something dangerous and warm. "I set up the conference room for you," Lucas told Ethan. "There's a TV if you want to watch something, or there are some books and puzzles, whatever you like, and if you get hungry, the kitchen is stocked." Ethan looked up at Sarah for permission. She nodded, and he scampered off to explore, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floors. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly. "You didn't have to do all that." "I wanted to." Lucas straightened. "He seems like a great kid." "He is. He's everything. Something in her voice must have conveyed the depth of that truth, because Lucas's expression grew thoughtful. "You're doing it alone." His father. Gone before Ethan was born. Sarah's tone didn't invite follow-up questions. "It's just us, always has been." Lucas nodded slowly. "My father died when I was 23, but before that, he was not someone I miss. So I understand, in a way. The relief of not having the wrong person in your life." Sarah met his eyes and saw the shadows there, saw something that matched her own scars. "Yeah, exactly that." They worked in companionable silence for an hour. Sarah organizing vendor contracts while Lucas typed away at his computer. Then Ethan appeared in the doorway, holding a math textbook. "Mom, I don't understand this problem." Sarah's stomach sank. Fifth-grade math had passed her by somewhere around the time she'd dropped out to work full-time. "Baby, I'm not sure I can." "Can I see?" Lucas asked gently. Ethan brought the book over, and Lucas studied the page. "Ah, fractions. These can be tricky. Here, let me show you something." Sarah watched as Lucas pulled out a notepad and drew circles, cutting them into pieces, explaining in a patient, clear voice how fractions worked, not talking down to Ethan, but genuinely teaching. And Ethan, her brilliant, curious boy, lit up with understanding. "Oh, so it's like pizza slices." "Exactly like pizza slices," Lucas confirmed, grinning. 4 slices out of 8 is the same as 1/2 of the pizza. That makes so much more sense than what Mrs. Henderson said. Ethan beamed up at him. "You're really smart." "Different people are smart in different ways," Lucas said, glancing at Sarah. "Your mum is smart in ways I'm not. I can do fractions and analyze data, but I freeze up when things get chaotic. Your mum, she keeps her head and takes charge. That's a different kind of smart, and honestly, it's the kind that matters more." Sarah's throat went tight. Nobody had ever called her smart before. Street smart, maybe. Tough. A survivor. But smart, like it was a compliment instead of a compromise. Ethan went back to his homework, and Sarah returned to her desk. But she couldn't focus. She kept glancing over at Lucas, watching him work, seeing the way his brow furrowed when he concentrated, the way he absently pushed his hair back when he was thinking, the quiet competence in everything he did. And she thought about the sealed envelope in her kitchen drawer. "Don't open until you realize you don't have to fight alone anymore." She wasn't ready to open it, wasn't ready to trust whatever was inside. But for the first time since her father's failures and her ex's abandonment, Sarah felt the tiniest crack in her armor, the smallest possibility that maybe, just maybe, not all men were disasters waiting to happen. Lucas's phone rang, and he answered with a clipped "Blackwood." Then his expression changed. "Mom, yes, I'm at the office." "Tomorrow." He glanced at Sarah and Ethan. "Actually, there's someone I'd like you to meet." Sarah's heart started racing. Meet his mother. Why would he want that? Lucas ended the call and turned to her, looking almost nervous. "My mother is inviting us to Sunday dinner, you and Ethan, at her home in Martha's Vineyard. I know it's last minute, and you can absolutely say no, but she's insistent. When she gets an idea, there's no stopping her." "Why does she want to meet us?" Sarah asked carefully. "Because I told her about you. About the bar, about the job, about—" He trailed off, seeming to search for words. "About how you made me think differently about courage." Sarah should say no, should keep her distance, should protect Ethan from getting attached to people who lived in a different universe. But Ethan had appeared in the doorway again, having clearly overheard. "Martha's Vineyard. I learned about that in geography. It's an island. Can we go, Mom? Please." And Sarah, looking at her son's hopeful face and Lucas's patient expression, found herself saying yes. Sunday morning arrived with nervous energy crackling through Sarah's small apartment. She'd woken at dawn, unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling and wondering what she'd gotten herself into. Martha's Vineyard, Eleanor Blackwood's home, a world so far removed from her own that she might as well be visiting another planet. "Mom, which shirt should I wear?" Ethan called from their shared closet space. He held up two options, his face serious with the weight of the decision. "The blue one," Sarah said, smoothing down her own outfit for the third time. The nicest dress she owned, a simple navy sheath that Rita had helped her pick out at a thrift store 2 years ago. "You look handsome, baby." The drive to the small airport, where Lucas had arranged for them to meet, left Sarah's hands sweating on the steering wheel. A private plane. He'd mentioned it so casually, like it was nothing, like everyone just hopped on private planes for Sunday dinner. Lucas was waiting by a sleek aircraft, dressed in khakis and a casual sweater that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. But his smile when he saw them was genuine, warm, and somehow that made it worse. Because Sarah was starting to like him, starting to trust him, and trust was the most dangerous thing she could offer. The flight was smooth, surreal. Ethan pressed his face to the window, narrating every cloud and landmark with breathless excitement. Lucas pointed things out, patient and engaged, and Sarah found herself watching them more than the scenery. The way Lucas spoke to her son like he mattered, like his observations were important. Not many men did that. Eleanor Blackwood's home took Sarah's breath away, not because it was ostentatious, though it was certainly grand, but because it felt lived in, loved. The white colonial house overlooked the ocean, surrounded by gardens that even in late October held the memory of summer blooms. This wasn't just wealth, this was legacy. Eleanor herself emerged before they'd even parked, and Sarah's first thought was that she looked nothing like what she'd expected. Yes, there was elegance in the silver hair and the cashmere cardigan, but there was also warmth, real warmth, not the brittle politeness of Margaret Whitmore. "You must be Sarah." Eleanor took both of Sarah's hands in hers, and her grip was firm, grounding. "Lucas has told me so much about you, and this must be Ethan." "Yes, Mom." Ethan's shy voice was back, but Eleanor crouched down just like Lucas had, meeting him at eye level. "I have a grandson about your age, but he's in California today. Would you like to see the treehouse while the adults talk? It's at the edge of the garden, and I promise the view is spectacular." Ethan looked at Sarah for permission. She nodded, and he raced off with the kind of unfiltered joy only children could access so easily. "Come inside," Eleanor said, linking her arm through Sarah's like they were old friends. "I've made tea, or coffee, if you prefer. Lucas says you work long hours." Inside, the house was even more beautiful. Family photographs covered every surface. Books lined the shelves, their spines worn from reading, not just display. This was a home, not a showpiece. A man emerged from the kitchen, tall and lean, with kind eyes and paint-stained hands. "You must be Sarah. I'm James, Eleanor's husband. Welcome." Sarah shook his hand, noting the calluses, artist calluses. "Thank you for having us." "Nonsense," Eleanor said, guiding Sarah to a comfortable sofa. "This is my son's doing, really. He's been different since he met you, lighter somehow." Sarah glanced at Lucas, who had the grace to look embarrassed. "Mom." "Oh, hush. I'm allowed to embarrass you. I'm your mother." Eleanor poured tea into delicate china cups. "Sarah, Lucas told me what you did at the bar. That took remarkable courage." "I just did what anyone would do." Sarah accepted the cup, careful not to let her hands shake. "No." Eleanor's voice was gentle but firm. "Most people wouldn't. Most people would have called for help and stayed safely distant. You put yourself between danger and someone who needed protection. That's not common. It's extraordinary." Sarah didn't know what to say to that. She'd never thought of herself as extraordinary. Stubborn, yes. Too proud for her own good, definitely. But extraordinary. The doorbell rang. and moments later a woman who looked like a female version of Lucas swept in, followed by a man and two young girls. "Sorry we're late, Mom. Emma couldn't find her shoes, and Lily insisted on bringing her entire stuffed animal collection." "Victoria!" Lucas stood and hugged his sister. "This is Sarah Miller. Sarah, my sister Victoria, her husband David, and their daughters Emma and Lily." Victoria's handshake was assessing but not unkind. Sarah recognized the look, protective older sister, measuring whether this stranger was good enough for her brother. But the girls, 8 and 6, had no such reservations. "Do you have kids?" Emma asked immediately. "I have a son, Ethan. He's 9. Almost 10, actually. He's exploring the tree house right now. Can we go play with him?" Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve. "If it's all right with his mother," Victoria said, looking at Sarah. "Of course." The girls thundered off, and the adults settled into conversation. Sarah mostly listened at first, trying to find her footing in this world of easy laughter and family history. But Eleanor had a gift for drawing her in, asking questions that weren't invasive but genuinely curious. "Lucas mentioned you're from Chicago originally," Eleanor asked. "Born and raised, South Side. That's quite different from this." Eleanor gestured to the ocean view. "I imagine. Different doesn't begin to cover it." Sarah set down her teacup. "I want to be honest, Mrs. Blackwood. I don't belong in this world. I'm a bartender who dropped out of high school. I raised my son alone in a studio apartment. I shop at thrift stores and clip coupons. This," she gestured around the beautiful room, "this isn't my life. And yet, here you are." Eleanor's eyes were knowing. "Do you know why I asked Lucas to bring you here?" Sarah shook her head. "Because when he told me about you, I heard something in his voice I haven't heard in years. Hope. My son is brilliant, successful, respected, but he's also been alone in ways that have nothing to do with whether there's someone in his bed or at his dinner table. He's been alone because he stopped believing anyone could see past his walls to who he really is." Eleanor leaned forward, her expression intense. "I don't care that you were a bartender. I don't care about your education or your income. I care that you saw my son paralyzed by fear and you didn't judge him. You protected him. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Sarah's throat tightened. "He told you about that, about freezing." "He did. Lucas doesn't talk about his father much, but that man left scars, deep ones." Eleanor's voice dropped. "I stayed in a marriage I should have left because I was afraid, and my children paid the price. James came into our lives after Richard died, and he showed us what gentleness looked like, what real strength was." James reached over and squeezed Eleanor's hand, a gesture so tender that Sarah had to look away from the intimacy of it. "The point is," Eleanor continued, "don't let different worlds stop you from seeing what's right in front of you. Lucas needs someone who values courage over credentials, and from what I can see, you need someone who values character over circumstance." Before Sarah could respond, the children burst back in, Ethan in the middle of the pack, laughing harder than Sarah had heard in months. His cheeks were flushed, his hair wild, and he looked so happy, it made her heart ache. "Mom, the treehouse has a telescope, and we saw a boat, and Emma knows all about constellations." "That's wonderful, baby." Sarah pulled him close, breathing in his joy. Dinner was a revelation. Not the food, though it was delicious. Home-cooked comfort food that Eleanor insisted was nothing fancy, but the conversation. The way everyone listened when someone spoke. The way Lucas and Victoria teased each other with obvious affection. The way James told stories that made everyone laugh. The way Eleanor made sure Sarah and Ethan felt included in every moment. This was what family looked like when it worked, when it was healthy. Sarah had never experienced it before, and the longing it created in her chest was almost painful. After dinner, as the sun set over the water, and the children played one last game in the garden. Lucas found Sarah standing by the window. "Your family is wonderful," she said quietly. "They like you." He stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "Mom pulled me aside earlier and told me if I mess this up, she'll disown me." Sarah laughed, despite herself. She did not say that. She absolutely did. Eleanor Blackwood doesn't mince words. He turned to face her. "Sarah, I know this is all happening fast. The job, meeting my family, all of it. If it's too much, please tell me." "It's not too much. It's just—" Sarah struggled to find the words. "It's so far from anything I've ever known. Your mother talks about character and courage like they matter more than money. But in my world, money is what keeps the lights on and puts food on the table. I can't afford to be idealistic." "She's not being idealistic. She's being honest." Lucas's voice was earnest. "My father had money, education, connections, and he was one of the worst men I've ever known. You have integrity and kindness. Those things can't be bought. Trust me, I've tried to buy my way out of enough problems to know." Sarah met his eyes and saw vulnerability there, saw the truth of his words written in the lines of his face, and she felt that crack in her armor widen just a little more. On the drive back that evening, Ethan fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from playing. Lucas insisted on driving them home, and Sarah was too tired to argue. "Thank you for today," she said as Chicago's skyline came into view. "Ethan had the best time." "What about you?" Lucas glanced at her. "Did you have a good time?" Sarah considered lying, considered keeping her walls up. But something about the darkness of the car, the intimacy of the moment, made her honest. "I did. Your family made me feel welcome. That's not something I'm used to." "You deserve to feel welcome everywhere you go." Lucas's voice was fierce. "Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise." He pulled up in front of her building, and Sarah carefully lifted the sleeping Ethan into her arms. Lucas walked them to the door, and when Sarah turned to say goodnight, she found him closer than she'd expected. "I meant what I said," he told her, "about character mattering more than circumstance. You're remarkable, Sarah Miller. I hope someday you'll believe that." He left before she could respond, and Sarah carried Ethan upstairs, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. She tucked her son into bed, kissed his forehead, and then stood in their tiny kitchen, staring at the drawer where the sealed envelope waited. Not yet. She wasn't ready yet, but maybe, just maybe, someday she would be. The following Thursday, Lucas appeared at Sarah's desk with an unusual request. "I need to see where you live." Sarah's defenses snapped into place. "Why? Because I keep talking about understanding the real world, about hiring you for your perspective, but I only see you here, in my world. I need to see yours." "No." Sarah's answer was immediate and firm. Lucas sat down across from her. "Please, I'm not trying to invade your privacy. I'm trying to understand. There's a difference." Sarah wanted to refuse, wanted to keep that boundary intact. Her home was hers, the one place that belonged completely to her and Ethan, but she'd seen Lucas's home, or at least his mother's, and maybe turnabout was fair play. "Fine, but just for a minute, and Ethan will be there." That evening, Lucas followed her modest sedan in his town car, and Sarah felt a familiar shame creeping in as they pulled up to her building. Graffiti on the walls, broken security door, flickering hallway lights. This was her reality. But when Lucas stepped inside her apartment, he didn't flinch, didn't show pity or disgust. He simply looked around with genuine interest. "It's cozy. It's tiny." Sarah couldn't keep the defensiveness from her voice. "Cozy," Lucas repeated firmly. "I grew up in a 15-room house and never felt at home. This feels like a home." Ethan was at the kitchen table, math homework spread in front of him, and he lit up when he saw Lucas. "Mr. Blackwood, can you help me with this problem?" Of course. Lucas sat down beside him, and they bent over the book together. Sarah made coffee, watching them from the small kitchen area, watching Lucas in her space with her son, and feeling something dangerous bloom in her chest, something that felt perilously close to hope. After helping Ethan finish his homework, Lucas looked at the medical bills stacked on the counter. Sarah saw his expression change. His asthma? Yeah, it's under control, mostly, but the medication is expensive even with the insurance. Lucas was quiet for a moment, and Sarah braced herself for pity, for an offer of money that would feel like charity. But he surprised her. My father had asthma, refused to acknowledge it because he saw it as weakness. He'd rather suffer than admit vulnerability. Lucas's voice was distant. I was 7 when he had a bad attack at a business dinner, collapsed right there in the restaurant, and even as they carried him out on a stretcher, he was angry, not scared, angry that people had seen him that way. That must have been hard, to witness that. Sarah poured coffee into mismatched mugs. It taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's just being human. Lucas accepted the mug. My father never learned that. It made him cruel, made him think power meant never showing fear or need. Is that why you froze at the bar? Not physical fear, but... Sarah trailed off, not sure how to finish. Trauma. Lucas said the word simply. I watched him beat my mother so badly once that I called 911. I was 13, and when the police came, she lied for him, protected him. I learned that night that courage wasn't enough, that sometimes the system protects the wrong people. Sarah set down her coffee, moving closer. I'm sorry. No child should see that. And no child should have to become the adult because their parents can't get their act together. Lucas met her eyes. Your shoplifting record. That was taking care of your brother, wasn't it? Sarah's breath caught. How did you... Background check before I hired you. I saw the sealed juvenile record, age 12, theft of food items. Father in the system for public intoxication multiple times. It doesn't take a genius to connect the dots. You hired me anyway. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I hired you because of it, because you did what you had to do to protect someone you loved. That's the kind of person I want on my team. Lucas reached across the small space between them, and his hand covered hers. Sarah, you've been fighting alone for so long, but you don't have to anymore. I don't know how to do it any other way. The admission cost her, but it was true. Trust means getting hurt. Every time I've trusted someone, they've left. My father, Ethan's father, even my mother in her own way. I know. Lucas's thumb traced circles on her hand. My father left too, even when he was standing right there, present but absent in all the ways that mattered. I learned to rely on myself, to solve everything with logic and planning, but some things can't be solved that way. Some things require leaning on someone else. Like what? Sarah asked. Like figuring out what real courage looks like. Lucas smiled sadly. You showed me that night at the bar. You didn't have a plan. You just acted because someone needed help. I've spent my whole life planning, strategizing, trying to control every variable. And when chaos showed up in the form of a drunk with a grudge, I had nothing. My brain just shut down. That's not your fault. Sarah's voice was fierce. That's trauma. That's your body protecting itself the only way it knew how. Maybe, but it felt like cowardice. Lucas's eyes held hers. Until I met you. Until I saw that courage comes in different forms. You have physical courage. I have intellectual courage. Neither is better. They're just different. Ethan called from the other room, asking if Sarah could read to him before bed, and the moment broke. But as Lucas stood to leave, he paused at the door. Thank you for letting me in, for showing me your world. It means more than you know. After he left, Sarah sat on the edge of Ethan's bed, reading his favorite story about a dragon who learned to fly without fear. And she thought about Lucas's words, about different kinds of courage, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry everything alone. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the sealed envelope in the kitchen drawer, thinking about Lucas's steady presence, thinking about Eleanor's words, and feeling for the first time in her adult life that maybe the walls she'd built to protect herself had also become a prison. She wasn't ready to open the envelope, wasn't ready to completely trust. But she was closer than she'd been, and that terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. December arrived in Chicago with unexpected gentleness. The first snow fell on a Friday afternoon, transforming the city into something almost magical. The office buzzed with holiday energy, and someone had convinced management to host a Christmas party. Sarah had never been to an office party before, didn't own anything appropriate to wear to one, but Rita, bless her, had loaned Sarah a deep green dress that made her eyes look brighter, and for once, Sarah allowed herself to feel almost pretty. The party was at a downtown hotel, all crystal chandeliers and champagne flutes and people who knew how to navigate these spaces effortlessly. Sarah clutched her own champagne glass like a lifeline, staying near the edges of the room. Margaret Whitmore held court near the bar, surrounded by board members and senior partners. Sarah heard her voice carry across the space, talking about maintaining standards and preserving the firm's reputation. And though Margaret didn't look her direction, Sarah knew somehow that she was part of what Margaret was protecting against. "She's exhausting, isn't she?" Victoria appeared beside Sarah, elegant in navy silk. "Don't let her get to you. She's been trying to manage Lucas's life since he took over the firm. She hates that he actually has a mind of his own. She hates that he hired me." Sarah took a sip of champagne for courage. "She hates change. There's a difference." Victoria studied Sarah with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're good for him. He smiles now, real smiles, not the corporate ones he puts on for board meetings." Before Sarah could respond, Lucas appeared, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo despite how well it fit him. "I hate these things," he muttered. "Then why have them?" Victoria asked. "Because Margaret insists they're important for morale." Lucas grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. "5 minutes of small talk, and I'm ready to fake the emergency and leave. You could just be honest and tell people you'd rather go home," Sarah said. Lucas looked at her like she'd suggested he sprout wings and fly. "You can do that." Victoria laughed. "Oh, I like her even more now." The evening progressed with the usual awkwardness of forced socializing. Sarah found herself in a conversation with a junior partner named Mark, who seemed genuinely nice, discussing vendor negotiations and supply chain logistics. It was the first time at one of these events that someone had talked to her about work instead of around her. Then Margaret's voice cut through the conversation like ice. "It's so refreshing to see Lucas hiring such diverse staff. Really brings a grounded perspective to our discussions." The words were complimentary. The tone was not. Sarah felt every eye in the immediate vicinity turn toward her, felt the weight of judgment and assessment, and she felt something inside her shift from uncertainty to clarity. "I think you mean it's refreshing to have someone who understands that real people exist outside corporate towers." Sarah's voice was calm, measured, but with steel underneath. Someone who knows that vendor relationships aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, but actual human beings trying to make a living. Someone who's negotiated prices because it mattered, not just as an intellectual exercise. Margaret's smile tightened. "Of course. That's exactly what I meant." "Good." Sarah held her gaze steadily, because Lucas Blackwood is one of the most brilliant, compassionate men I've ever met. And if you think his hiring choices are anything less than strategic and well-considered, then you're underestimating him, which would be unfortunate, given that he's your CEO. The silence that followed was profound. Victoria bit back a smile. Mark looked impressed, and Margaret, for once, seemed to have nothing to say. Lucas appeared at Sarah's elbow. "Can I steal you for a dance?" Sarah let him lead her to the dance floor, her heart pounding. "I probably just made an enemy for life." "You defended me." Lucas's voice held wonder. "Nobody ever does that." "Of course I did." She was condescending and dismissive, and Sarah stopped, realizing what she'd revealed, how much she cared, how far past professional boundaries she'd already traveled. Lucas pulled her closer as they swayed to the soft music. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." Her breath caught. "Okay, I'm falling for you." The words were quiet, meant only for her. "I know it's complicated. I know there's the job and the difference in our backgrounds and 1,000 reasons why this might be a bad idea. But I can't pretend anymore that you're just an employee. You're not. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for." Sarah's throat tightened. "Lucas, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know, because hiding it was making me feel dishonest, and you deserve honesty." His grey eyes held hers. "Whatever you decide, whatever you're comfortable with, I'll respect it. But I had to tell you the truth." The music swelled around them, and Sarah felt something inside her break open. All the carefully constructed walls, all the protective armor, cracking under the weight of his sincerity. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Every person I've ever trusted has left, or hurt me, or both. I know." Lucas's hand tightened on hers. "I'm terrified too, because I've never felt this way before, and I don't have a strategy for it. Can't logic my way through it. I just have to feel it and hope I don't mess it up." That's not very comforting, but Sarah was smiling despite the tears threatening. "No, but it's honest." Lucas smiled back. "What do you say we leave this party and go somewhere we can actually talk?" They slipped out into the snowy Chicago night, and Lucas walked her the 6 blocks toward her neighborhood, both of them wrapped in coats and the intimacy of shared secrets. The city was quiet under its blanket of white, and for once, Sarah let herself imagine a different kind of future. One where she wasn't always fighting. One where she could let someone in without fear of destruction. They reached her building too soon, and Sarah turned to face him on the steps. Snow caught in his hair, in his eyelashes, and he'd never looked more real, more human, more like someone who could actually understand her. "I'm falling for you too," she said, the words escaping before courage could fail her, "and it scares me more than anything I've ever faced." Lucas cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away snow, or maybe tears. "Then let's be scared together." He kissed her, soft at first, tentative, asking permission, and Sarah, who had spent her whole life learning to fight and defend and protect, finally let herself surrender. Let herself feel the sweetness of being cherished. Let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe not everyone left. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I should go, before I forget myself entirely." "Yeah, you should." But Sarah didn't move, didn't want him to leave, didn't want this moment to end and reality to come crashing back. "Sarah," his voice was rough with emotion, "whatever happens next, whatever we face, I want you to know something. You're not alone anymore. Whether you're ready to believe that or not, it's true. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." He kissed her once more, quick and sweet, and then walked away into the snowing night, leaving Sarah standing on her steps with her heart cracked open and tears streaming down her face. Happy tears, terrified tears, both at once. Inside her apartment, Rita was watching Ethan, and Sarah paid her with grateful thanks and waited until her son was asleep before allowing herself to think about what had just happened. She'd kissed Lucas Blackwood. She'd told him she was falling for him. She'd let down every guard she possessed. And the scary part, the truly terrifying part, was that she didn't regret it. She stood in her kitchen, staring at the drawer where the sealed envelope waited. "Don't open until you realize you don't have to fight alone anymore." Lucas's words echoed. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Sarah's hand reached for the drawer, then stopped. Not yet. Not quite yet. But soon. Maybe soon. The next morning, a Saturday, started with Ethan bouncing on her bed. "Mom, wake up. There's a package at the door." Sarah stumbled out of bed, still wearing yesterday's dress, and found a large box on her doorstep. Inside was a year's supply of Ethan's asthma medication, all of it, prepaid, with a small note in Lucas's handwriting, because nobody should have to choose between medicine and groceries, no strings attached. This is separate from everything else. Just one human caring for another. Sarah sank to the floor, the note clutched in her hand, and cried, not sad tears. Overwhelmed tears because someone had seen her struggle and hadn't offered empty words, hadn't offered pity, had simply, quietly, done something to help. No fanfare, no expectation of gratitude, just kindness. And for the first time in her life, Sarah Miller let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, good men existed. And maybe she'd found one. That belief lasted exactly 3 days. On Tuesday morning, a legal notice arrived at the office. Danny Murphy, the bar patron from that October night, was filing a lawsuit against the bar, against Lucas, and against Sarah. The walls she'd let down began rebuilding themselves, brick by brick, because Sarah had learned young that happiness never lasted, and now, it seemed, she was about to learn that lesson all over again. The lawsuit papers sat on Sarah's desk like an accusation. She'd read them 3 times, each pass making her stomach tighten further. Danny Murphy claimed excessive force, emotional distress, loss of reputation. He was suing the Rusty Anchor for $10,000. Lucas Blackwood for $50,000, and Sarah Miller for $20,000. $20,000. She didn't have $20 in savings, let alone $20,000. The legal discovery had been thorough, too thorough. Her sealed juvenile record had somehow been unsealed, the details laid out in black and white: theft of food items, age 12, father with multiple arrests for public intoxication. The facts were accurate, the context was absent, and now everyone would know. Sarah stared at her computer screen, seeing nothing, feeling everything. The familiar weight of shame settling on her shoulders like an old coat she'd thought she'd finally thrown away. "Sarah?" Lucas appeared in her doorway, his face creased with concern. "I just saw the papers. I'm so sorry. My lawyers are already on it. We'll fight this. It says I have a criminal record." Sarah's voice was flat. "It's public now. Everyone will know. Everyone who matters already knows." Lucas stepped into her office and closed the door. "I knew before I hired you. My mother knows. Victoria knows. They don't care. Margaret will care." Sarah finally looked up at him. "The board will care. Your business partners will care. Then they're short-sighted." Lucas's jaw was set, determined. This is Murphy trying to extort money. It won't work, but it was already working. By Wednesday, a local news outlet had picked up the story, not front page, but enough. CEO's employee faces questions about past. The article was carefully worded, avoiding outright accusations, but the implication was clear. Sarah Miller, hired by prominent businessman Lucas Blackwood, had a history, a record, questions about judgment and appropriateness. Sarah arrived at the office Thursday morning to find reporters camped outside the building. Not many, just 2, but enough to make her stomach churn. They shouted questions as she hurried past, keeping her head down, saying nothing. Ms. Miller, is it true you have a criminal record? Ms. Miller, did Mr. Blackwood know about your past when he hired you? Ms. Miller, are you and Mr. Blackwood romantically involved? That last question made her stumble. Because yes, they were, sort of. They'd kissed, they'd confessed feelings, but nothing had been defined, nothing made official. And now the whole mess was becoming public before they'd even figured out what they were to each other. Inside the building, Jennifer, the receptionist, gave her a sympathetic smile. Don't let them get to you. They'll move on to the next story by next week. Sarah hoped she was right, but experience had taught her that trouble never moved on. It just found new ways to stick around. Margaret called an emergency meeting that afternoon. Not a full board meeting, just the senior partners and Lucas. Sarah wasn't invited, but she could see them through the glass walls of the conference room. Margaret's animated gestures, the concerned faces of the other partners, Lucas's rigid posture, arms crossed, defensive. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language. They were talking about her, about damage control, about managing public perception. Lucas emerged an hour later, his face tight with controlled anger. He went straight to his office without looking at anyone, and Sarah gave him 30 minutes before she knocked on his door. Come in. His voice was clipped. Sarah entered to find him standing at the window, staring out at the city. What did they say? Margaret suggested you take a voluntary leave of absence. Let things quiet down, then maybe come back in a few months once the lawsuit is resolved. Lucas didn't turn around. The other partners agreed it might be best. And what did you say? Sarah kept her voice steady. I told them no. I told them you're valuable to this firm and you're staying. Now he turned, and she saw the frustration in his eyes. But they're scared, Sarah. Scared of bad publicity. Scared of clients asking questions. They want the easy solution, which is me leaving. Sarah nodded slowly. Maybe they're right. Don't, Lucas crossed to her in 2 strides. Don't you dare agree with them. I'm not saying I want to leave. I'm saying maybe it would be easier for everyone if I did. Temporarily, just until this blows over. Nothing about this is easy. Lucas's hands clenched at his sides, like he wanted to reach for her but didn't trust himself. But running away doesn't solve anything. I'm not running away. I'm being strategic. There's a difference. Sarah met his gaze. You taught me that. Sometimes the smart move is a tactical retreat. Not this time. His voice was fierce. Not when it means you think you're the problem. You're not the problem, Sarah. Murphy is. The system that unsealed a juvenile record is. The people who judge you for surviving your childhood are, but not you. Never you. Sarah wanted to believe him, wanted to let his certainty become hers, but years of being told she didn't belong, didn't measure up, didn't deserve good things, those years had roots that went deep. I need to think, she said finally. I need to figure out what's best for Ethan, for me, for us, if there is an us. There is an us. Lucas's voice cracked slightly. At least, I want there to be. But I understand if this is too much. If I'm too much. If my world is too complicated. Sarah left his office with her heart feeling like it had been put through a grinder. She finished her work on autopilot, ignored the few colleagues who tried to offer sympathy that felt more like curiosity, and drove home in silence. Ethan was at the kitchen table doing homework, and when he looked up at her, Sarah saw concern in his young face. Mom, are you okay? Some kids at school said stuff today. Sarah's heart broke a little more. What kind of stuff, baby? That you got in trouble? That you did something bad a long time ago? Ethan's voice was small. I told them you're the best mom in the world and they don't know anything, but they laughed at me. Sarah pulled him into her arms, holding tight. Listen to me. When I was 12, younger than you are now, I made a choice. I stole food from a store so my little brother wouldn't be hungry. It was wrong, legally. I broke the law, but I would do it again in a heartbeat, because family takes care of family. So you did do something bad? Ethan pulled back to look at her face. I did something illegal, but not bad. There's a difference. Sarah touched his cheek. Sometimes life gives us choices where every option hurts. And we have to pick the choice that hurts the least, that protects the people we love most. That's what I did. That's what I'll always do. Is that why people are saying mean things now? Ethan's eyes filled with tears. Because you protected Uncle Michael. Some people don't understand context. They just see the rule that was broken, not the reason why. Sarah wiped his tears with her thumb. But the people who matter, the people who really know us, they understand. Mr. Blackwood understands. Grandma Eleanor understands. Rita understands. That's enough. But was it enough? That night, after Ethan fell asleep, Sarah lay in bed staring at the ceiling and wondering if love was ever enough when the whole world seemed determined to tear you apart. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. I'm not giving up on us. Whatever you decide, know that. I'm not going anywhere. Sarah typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, thank you. I just need time to think. What she didn't say was that thinking was all she'd ever done, thinking and fighting and surviving. What she didn't know how to do was trust. Trust that Lucas would stay when things got hard. Trust that his world would make room for someone like her. Trust that she deserved any of this in the first place. Friday brought more tension. Margaret caught Sarah in the hallway, her expression carefully neutral. Sarah, might I have a word? They stepped into an empty office, and Margaret closed the door. I want to be direct with you. This situation is untenable. The firm is facing questions from clients. The media attention is unwelcome, and frankly, your continued presence here is becoming a liability. Sarah felt the familiar anger rising, but she kept her voice level. I understand your concern. But I haven't done anything wrong. I'm good at my job. The clients I work with directly have no complaints. It's not about competence. It's about optics. Margaret's tone was almost sympathetic. Almost. In our world, perception matters as much as reality. And right now, the perception is that Lucas made a questionable hiring decision, that he let personal feelings cloud his judgment. So this is about Lucas and me. Sarah crossed her arms. Not about my work, not about my past, about the fact that he cares about me and you think that's inappropriate. I think it's complicated, Margaret sighed. Look, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to protect this firm. We've built a reputation over decades. One scandal can undo all of that. A scandal. Sarah's laugh was bitter. A 12-year-old girl stealing bread is a scandal to you. A woman working hard and raising her son alone is scandalous. But a grown man filing a frivolous lawsuit to extort money, that's just business as usual. That's not what I meant, isn't it? Sarah met her gaze steadily. You look at me and see someone who doesn't belong, someone who brings down the neighborhood. But you know what I see when I look at Lucas? I see someone who values character over credentials, someone who understands that intelligence comes in many forms, someone who's braver than he thinks he is. He's also someone who needs to think strategically about his leadership. Margaret's voice hardened. And right now, the strategic choice is clear. Sarah left that conversation feeling like she'd been punched. Not because Margaret was wrong about the optics, she was probably right, but because Sarah had spent her whole life being told she wasn't enough, and here was that message again, dressed up in corporate language and delivered with a sympathetic expression. That weekend, Sarah kept her distance from Lucas, returned his calls with brief texts, told him she needed space to process everything, and she did need space. needed to think clearly without his grey eyes and gentle voice, making her believe in possibilities that logic said were impossible. Monday brought the emergency board meeting. Sarah wasn't supposed to know about it, but Jennifer had given her a sympathetic heads up. They're voting on whether to require your leave of absence. Thought you should know. Sarah stood outside the conference room, not close enough to hear clearly, but close enough to see. Lucas stood at the head of the table, his posture rigid. Margaret presented her case, papers spread before her. Other board members leaned in, asking questions, debating, and Sarah realized with sudden, painful clarity that she was watching Lucas fight for her, fight against his own board, his own colleagues, people he'd worked with for years, all for her. The meeting stretched to 2 hours. Sarah returned to her desk, unable to concentrate, unable to do anything but refresh her email compulsively and wonder what verdict was being handed down inside that glass-walled room. Finally, Lucas emerged. He didn't look at anyone, just walked straight to his office and closed the door. Not a good sign. Sarah gave him 20 minutes, then went to find him. He was sitting at his desk, head in his hands, and he looked more defeated than she'd ever seen him. "Lucas?" She closed the door behind her. He looked up, and the exhaustion in his face made her chest ache. "They didn't vote to fire you, but they voted to strongly encourage your voluntary leave of absence, with pay, technically, so it's not a termination, but the message was clear. They want you gone." "Okay." Sarah's voice was surprisingly calm. "Then I'll go." "What?" "No." Lucas stood abruptly. "I told them I'd fight this. I told them you're staying." "And then what?" Sarah asked quietly. "You fight your own board every day. Watch them undermine you. Watch your business relationships suffer because you're defending me. That's not sustainable, Lucas. I don't care if it's sustainable. I care that it's right. But I care that you're being hurt because of me." Sarah moved closer. "I care that this is costing you, and I won't let you sacrifice everything you've built for someone like me. Someone like you." Lucas's voice rose. "Ooh, what does that even mean? Someone honest? Someone brave? Someone who makes me want to be better than I am? Someone from the wrong side of the tracks with a criminal record and a kid and baggage you don't need?" Sarah's voice broke. "Face it, Lucas. Your mother and Victoria might accept me, but your professional world never will. We were kidding ourselves to think otherwise." "So that's it." Lucas stared at her. "You're just going to give up, going to run away because it's hard." "I'm not running. I'm being realistic." Sarah blinked back tears. "I have a son to think about. He's getting teased at school. I'm getting harassed by reporters. You're fighting your own board. This isn't working." "Then we make it work." Lucas's hands were shaking. "We fight harder. I'm tired of fighting." The words burst out of Sarah with more force than she'd intended. "I'm tired of proving myself. I'm tired of being the person who doesn't belong and has to work twice as hard to earn half the respect. I've been fighting my whole life, Lucas. Fighting to survive, fighting to protect Ethan, fighting for every scrap of dignity and security. I'm just tired." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of the city far below. Lucas stood frozen, and Sarah saw the moment understanding hit him. Saw him realize this wasn't about the lawsuit or the board or even Margaret. This was about something deeper, something Sarah had been carrying since she was 10 years old. "Then let me fight for you," Lucas said finally, his voice rough. "Let me be the one who carries it for a while." "That's not how it works." Sarah wiped at her eyes. "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering." Lucas crossed to her, and this time he did reach out, taking her hands in his. "Sarah, listen to me. I know you're used to doing everything alone. I know you've learned that depending on people means getting hurt. But I'm not your father. I'm not Ethan's father. I'm not going to disappear when things get hard. You say that now. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Everyone says that, until they don't. Lucas pulled her into his arms, and she let herself sink into the embrace, let herself feel the solid warmth of him. I can't prove the future to you. I can only show up every day and hope that eventually you'll believe me. But Sarah, please, don't leave, don't let them win, don't let fear make your decisions. Sarah wanted to believe him, wanted to be brave, but bravery had limits, and she'd reached hers. I need time, she said against his chest. I need to think about what's best for Ethan, for me, for both of us. How much time? Lucas asked. I don't know. Sarah pulled back to look at him. But I need you to respect that. I need space to figure this out without you being so understanding and patient and wonderful, because that makes it harder. Lucas's smile was sad. Okay, I'll give you space. But I'm not giving up. That envelope I gave you, the one I told you not to open, maybe it's time. Maybe whatever's in there will help you decide. He kissed her forehead, gentle and achingly tender, and then let her go. Sarah left the office early, picked up Ethan from school, and drove home in a daze. That evening, she made dinner on autopilot, helped Ethan with his homework, read him a story, and went through all the motions of normal life, while her mind spun in circles. At 2 a.m, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Lucas's words, thinking about the envelope, thinking about trust and fear and the possibility of letting someone else carry the weight for once. Don't open until you realize you don't have to fight alone anymore. She got up, padded to the kitchen in bare feet, and opened the drawer where the envelope had waited for months. The red wax seal gleamed in the dim light from the street lamp outside her window. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Inside the envelope were 2 things: a check for $50,000, made out to Ethan Miller with college fund, written in the memo line, and a letter, 3 pages, handwritten in Lucas's careful script. Sarah sank into a kitchen chair and began to read. Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, it means you've reached a moment of decision, a moment where you're weighing whether to trust me, to trust us, to trust that you don't have to carry everything alone anymore. I'm writing this the day after you saved me at the Rusty Anchor. I don't know if I'll ever see you again. I don't know if you'll accept my job offer. I don't know anything except that you changed something in me that night. I've spent my entire adult life believing that intelligence could solve any problem, that planning and strategy and control were the answers to life's chaos. And then a drunk man swung at me, and my body betrayed me. My mind screamed to move, to defend myself, to do something, but I couldn't. I was frozen by fear so old and deep that it might as well have been carved into my bones. My father used his fists the way other men use words, with precision, with intent to harm. I watched him destroy my mother's spirit piece by piece, and I swore I would never be like him. I would never use violence. I would never lose control. But in avoiding becoming him, I became something else. Someone who couldn't act when action was needed. Someone paralyzed by the very thing I'd sworn to avoid. And then you stepped between me and danger without hesitation. You didn't overthink it. You didn't weigh the risks. You just saw someone who needed help and you helped them. That kind of courage, that kind of immediate, instinctive bravery, it's everything I'm not. You probably think I offered you the job out of guilt, or pity, or some misguided sense of obligation. But that's not why. I offered it because in that moment I realized something crucial. Courage comes in many forms. I have intellectual courage. I can stand in front of a boardroom and defend my decisions. I can negotiate complex deals and navigate corporate politics. But you have physical courage, moral courage, the courage to do what's right even when it costs you, even when nobody's watching, even when the person you're saving is a stranger in an expensive suit who looks like he has everything you don't. This check is for Ethan, because education matters. Because I had every advantage growing up, even with a terrible father, and it would be unconscionable for me to watch a bright child struggle because of circumstances beyond his control. This isn't charity. This isn't pity. This is one human being recognizing another human being's worth and doing something about it, no strings attached. Whether you stay at the firm or leave, whether we ever speak again or become friends or become something more, this money is Ethan's, free and clear, because he deserves the chance to build any future he wants. But I hope, Sarah Miller, that by the time you open this envelope, you'll understand something else too. You're not alone. You don't have to be alone. Even the strongest warriors, the fiercest protectors, they need someone to stand beside them, not to fight their battles, not to fix their problems, just to be there, to share the weight. To remind them that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the most terrifying thing in the world, letting someone in, believing they won't leave, trusting that they'll stay when things get hard. I know that because I'm terrified too, terrified that I'm not strong enough, brave enough, worthy enough, terrified that my freeze response will kick in at exactly the wrong moment, and you'll see me as the coward I sometimes believe I am. But you taught me something that night at the bar. You taught me that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about acting despite the fear. It's about doing what needs to be done even when your hands are shaking and your heart is pounding and your brain is screaming at you to run. So here I am, Sarah, doing the bravest thing I've ever done. I'm writing you this letter. I'm giving you this money. I'm hoping that someday, when you read these words, you'll understand that you're worth fighting for, you're worth protecting, you're worth believing in, not because of what you can do for me, not because you saved me from a bar fight, but because you're remarkable, you're strong and fierce and kind and real in a world full of pretense and facades. You see through the expensive suits and the corporate titles and the carefully maintained images. You see people, you see truth. And if you'll let me, I'd like to be the person who sees you the same way, who sees past the armor you wear and the walls you've built and the tough exterior you show the world. I'd like to see Sarah Miller, the woman who steals food for her brother at 12, the mother who works double shifts so her son can have medicine, the survivor who never learned to stop fighting. I'd like to be your army, not because you need one, but because you deserve one. Whatever you decide, know this: you changed my life that night. You changed how I see courage. You changed how I see myself, and I'll be grateful for that forever, whether we share another moment or never speak again. With more hope than I've felt in years, Lucas Blackwood Sarah read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Not sad tears, not scared tears, something else entirely, something that felt like being seen, really seen. For the first time in her life, she sat in her kitchen as dawn broke over Chicago, holding Lucas's words in her hands, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. The walls she'd built, stone by stone, year by year, they began to crumble. Not all at once, but enough to see what Lucas had been trying to tell her all along, that accepting help wasn't weakness, that trusting someone wasn't surrender, that letting someone fight beside her didn't diminish her own strength. She picked up her phone and typed a message. I read it. I understand now. We need to talk. His response came within seconds, like he'd been awake, waiting. I'm on my way. But before he arrived, Sarah had one more thing to do. She called the number she'd sworn she'd never call, the number that had been disconnected and reconnected 3 times over the years. Her mother's number. Hello? Patricia's voice was cautious, like she expected bad news. Mom, it's Sarah. A long pause. Sarah, it's early. Is everything okay? No, actually, it's not. Sarah took a breath. Someone I care about is fighting for me. Fighting his own colleagues, his own board, risking his reputation and his business relationships. And I'm about to run away because I'm scared, because I don't know how to let someone help me. And I realized I learned that from you. From watching you refuse help until it was too late. From watching you choose pride over partnership. Sarah, that's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. Sarah's voice wasn't angry, just honest. I don't want to be you, Mom. I don't want to be alone at 60 because I was too scared to trust anyone at 35. So I'm calling to tell you that I'm choosing differently. I'm choosing to be brave in a new way. And maybe someday you can choose that too. She hung up before her mother could respond, before doubt could creep back in, before fear could rebuild the walls that were finally coming down. When Lucas arrived 20 minutes later, still in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, hair uncombed and eyes worried, Sarah opened the door and pulled him inside. "I'm sorry," she said before he could speak. "I'm sorry for letting fear make my decisions. I'm sorry for not trusting that you'd stay. I'm sorry for believing I had to fight this alone." "You don't have to apologize." Lucas cupped her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. "You were scared. You're allowed to be scared." "But I'm done running." Sarah's voice was fierce. "Tomorrow, we face that board meeting together. We tell them that I'm not taking a leave of absence, that I earned my position here and I'm not giving it up because of a frivolous lawsuit and some bad press. And if they fire me, they fire me. But I won't leave quietly. I won't let them make me feel like I'm the problem. Sarah, I read your letter, all of it, 3 times. She held his gaze. You said you wanted to be my army. Well, I'm accepting that offer. Not because I can't fight my own battles, but because I'm tired of fighting them alone. Because you're right. Even warriors need someone standing beside them. Lucas pulled her into his arms, and she felt him trembling. I was so scared you'd leave, that I'd lose you before I even really had you. I almost did. Sarah held him tighter. But then I realized something. You've been showing me who you are since that first night. Consistent, patient, kind, honest. Everything my father wasn't. Everything Ethan's father wasn't. And I kept waiting for you to reveal the catch, the hidden cruelty, the moment you'd turn into someone else. But that moment never came, because there is no catch. You're just you. Flawed and scared, and definitely not perfect. Lucas pulled back to look at her. I still freeze sometimes. I still panic when things get chaotic. I'm still working through trauma that's decades old. I know. Sarah touched his face. And I'm still defensive and stubborn and convinced everyone's going to leave. We're both broken in our own ways, but maybe broken together is better than whole and alone. Lucas kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of relief. And Sarah kissed him back with everything she'd been holding inside, all the fear and hope and love and terror and possibility. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. So we do this together. We face them together. Together, Sarah nodded. Whatever happens, we face it side by side. Outside her window, Chicago was waking up. A new day, a new choice, a new way forward. And for the first time in her life, Sarah Miller wasn't fighting alone. The rest of that day passed in preparation. Lucas called his lawyers. Sarah rehearsed what she wanted to say. They made a plan, revised it, made it again. And through it all, there was a new ease between them, a partnership that felt solid in a way nothing in Sarah's life ever had before. That evening, as they sat at her tiny kitchen table eating takeout and going over notes one last time, Ethan came home from spending the day at Rita's. He stopped short when he saw Lucas, then grinned. "Mr. Blackwood, are you and Mom on a date?" Sarah opened her mouth to deflect, but Lucas beat her to it. "Actually, Ethan, I was hoping to talk to you about that. Would you sit with us for a minute? Ethan scrambled into a chair, eyes wide and curious. Lucas looked at Sarah for permission, and she nodded, her heart in her throat. Your mom and I have become very good friends, Lucas started, but I'd like to be more than friends. I'd like to date her. Officially. But that affects you too, so I wanted to ask if that would be okay with you. Ethan looked between them, serious as only a 9-year-old could be. Do you make my mom happy? I try to. Lucas met his gaze steadily. And she makes me happy too. And you won't leave us. Ethan's voice got smaller. My dad left before I was even born, and Mom said he was bad at promises. Lucas didn't look away, didn't soften the question or try to make it easier. Ethan, I can't promise that nothing will ever go wrong. Life is complicated, and sometimes things don't work out the way we hope. But I can promise that I won't leave just because things get hard. I can promise that your mom matters to me, and you matter to me. And I'm not the kind of person who walks away from people who matter. Ethan thought about this, his young face scrunched in concentration. Finally, he nodded. Okay, but if you hurt my mum, I'll be really mad at you. That's fair, Lucas smiled. If I hurt your mum, I'll be really mad at me too. And you have to help me with math homework. Mum's not good at fractions. Hey, Sarah protested, but she was laughing. Deal. Lucas extended his hand, and Ethan shook it solemnly. Math homework help in exchange for permission to date your mom. That seems like a fair trade. Later, after Ethan was in bed and Lucas was getting ready to leave, he pulled Sarah close one more time. Are you ready for tomorrow? No. Sarah was honest. But I'm doing it anyway. That's courage. Lucas kissed her softly. That's you. He left, and Sarah stood in her apartment feeling strange and wonderful and terrified. Tomorrow they would face the board. Tomorrow they would find out if standing together was enough. Tomorrow everything could fall apart. But for tonight, Sarah let herself believe in Lucas, believe in herself, believe in the possibility that maybe, just maybe, love could be enough. Outside, somewhere in the city, Danny Murphy was probably planning his next move. Margaret was probably strategizing. The board members were probably debating. But inside Sarah's apartment, as she checked on Ethan one more time and saw him sleeping peacefully, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt hope. Real, solid, terrifying hope. And that, she thought, as she finally fell asleep, was worth fighting for. Morning arrived with the weight of consequence. Sarah stood in front of her closet, staring at the borrowed professional clothes that had become her uniform, and made a choice. Today wasn't about fitting in. Today was about standing up. She chose her nicest outfit, the navy dress that made her feel strong and held her head high. Lucas picked her up at 7:30. They'd agreed to arrive together, to walk in side by side, to show the board that they were united. When Sarah climbed into his car, he reached over and squeezed her hand. You ready? He asked. No? Sarah squeezed back. But I'm doing it anyway. The drive to the office was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Sarah kept rehearsing what she wanted to say, the words she'd practiced a dozen times the night before, but she also knew that when the moment came, she'd speak from the heart. That was the only way she knew how. They walked into the building together, and Jennifer gave them a supportive nod from reception. They're waiting in the main conference room. Good luck. The conference room was full. All the senior partners, several board members, and Margaret at the head of the table looking like she'd already won. Sarah felt her old instincts kick in, the ones that said fight or flight, defend or attack. But then Lucas's hand found the small of her back, steady and reassuring, and she remembered she wasn't alone. Thank you all for coming. Lucas's voice was calm, professional, I know Margaret called this meeting to discuss Sarah Miller's employment status. Before any motions are made, Sarah has something she'd like to say. Margaret's expression flickered with surprise. She'd probably expected Sarah to be absent, to let Lucas fight this battle for her, but Sarah was done letting other people tell her story. She stood, and every eye in the room turned to her. For a moment, the weight of their collective judgment threatened to crush her. But then she thought of Ethan, sleeping peacefully last night, thought of Lucas's letter, telling her she was worth fighting for, thought of Eleanor's words about character mattering more than credentials. "Before you vote on whether I belong here," Sarah began, her voice steady, "I want to tell you the full story of my so-called criminal record." She saw several people shift uncomfortably. Margaret's jaw tightened, but Sarah pressed on. "When I was 12 years old, I stole food from a grocery store, a loaf of bread, peanut butter, some apples. Not for myself. For my 6-year-old brother, Michael. Our father had spent his paycheck on alcohol. Again, our mother had left us 3 months earlier because she couldn't handle his drinking anymore, and I was the oldest, so I became the adult." Sarah's hands were steady now, her voice gaining strength. "I got caught. Of course I got caught. 12-year-olds aren't good criminals. The police came. I was arrested. They called my father, who showed up drunk, and told them to just lock me up because I was nothing but trouble anyway." She saw a few faces soften, saw Lucas watching her with pride and pain mixed together. A social worker intervened, got the charges reduced, had my record sealed when I turned 18. But the damage was done. I'd learned that asking for help meant humiliation, that depending on anyone meant disappointment, so I stopped asking. I stopped depending. I learned to fight every battle alone. Sarah took a breath and met Margaret's eyes. Was what I did illegal? Absolutely. Do I regret it? Not for a second. I kept my brother alive. I protected someone who couldn't protect himself, and I'd do it again tomorrow if faced with the same choice. But that's not really why we're here, is it? Sarah's voice grew firmer. "We're not here because of something I did 23 years ago. We're here because Lucas Blackwood hired someone who doesn't fit your image. Someone who didn't go to the right schools, or come from the right family, or know the right people." She turned to address the whole room. "Since I started here 3 months ago, I've renegotiated 5 vendor contracts, saving this firm over $40,000. I've mediated 3 client disputes that were heading toward legal action. I've brought real-world perspective to decisions that were being made in theoretical vacuums. I work harder than almost anyone in this building because I've never had the luxury of coasting on reputation or connections." Sarah's voice softened slightly. "And yes, I've fallen in love with Lucas Blackwood. If that's your real concern, if you think someone from my background doesn't deserve someone like him, then vote accordingly. But know that he's the finest man I've ever known. He values character over credentials. He sees people, not resumes. And he's teaching me something I desperately needed to learn, that accepting partnership isn't weakness, it's wisdom." She sat down, her heart pounding, her hands shaking now that the speech was over. Lucas reached under the table and took her hand, and she felt his fingers trembling too. Margaret opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, a voice came from the back of the room. "I'd like to say something." Everyone turned. Eleanor Blackwood stood in the doorway, elegant in a simple grey suit, her eyes fierce and clear. "Mrs. Blackwood," Margaret's voice was tight, "this is a closed board meeting. I'm a shareholder, left to me by my late husband, which means I have every right to be here." Eleanor walked into the room and stood beside Sarah. "And I have something the rest of you need to hear." The room fell silent. Eleanor commanded attention in a way that had nothing to do with wealth or status, and everything to do with the force of her presence. "My name is Eleanor Blackwood. Some of you knew my first husband, Richard Blackwood. Harvard-educated, Wall Street pedigree, impeccable credentials. Eleanor's voice was measured, deliberate. He also beat me for 15 years, put me in the hospital twice, terrorized our children, made my son so afraid of violence that he still freezes when confronted with physical conflict. Sarah heard Lucas's sharp intake of breath beside her. Several board members looked uncomfortable, unsure where to look. Richard had everything you claimed to value. Eleanor continued. Education, breeding, social standing, and he used all of it to hide the monster he was behind closed doors. People like him, people like some of you, valued appearance over substance, credentials over character. Eleanor placed her hand on Sarah's shoulder. This woman has shown more courage, integrity, and genuine strength in 3 months than my ex-husband showed in his entire lifetime. She protected my son when he needed help. She works with dedication and intelligence. She raises her child alone with grace and dignity, and she loves Lucas in a way that makes him finally understand what healthy partnership looks like. She turned to face the board directly. If you can't see past your prejudices to recognize that, then you're not just failing Sarah, you're failing this company. You're failing Lucas, and you're failing basic human decency. The silence that followed was profound. Eleanor returned to the back of the room, and suddenly James Hart was there beside her, his presence quiet but supportive. Sarah realized they must have driven down together, must have planned this. Margaret looked like she'd been slapped. Several board members were whispering to each other, and Lucas looked like he was seeing his mother for the first time, really seeing the warrior she'd always been beneath the elegant exterior. I motion that we vote, one of the older board members, a man named Robert, said quietly. Sarah Miller stays with full support, or we're making the wrong choice for all the wrong reasons. Second, another voice called. The vote happened quickly. Hands raised, Sarah counted, her heart in her throat. 7 in favor of her staying, 4 against. Not unanimous, but enough, more than enough. Margaret stood abruptly. I see how this is going. I've served this board for 12 years, but I won't be part of a decision I believe is wrong. She gathered her papers. Consider this my resignation, effective immediately. She walked out, head high, and Sarah felt no triumph. Only sadness that someone so intelligent could be so limited by her own prejudices. After Margaret left, several board members approached Sarah directly. Robert shook her hand. You were right about those vendor contracts. Made me look at our processes differently. Good work. Another partner, a woman named Jennifer from accounting, smiled warmly. My daughter's in law school, working 3 jobs to pay for it. Your speech reminded me that credentials aren't everything. Character is. One by one, they left until only Sarah and Lucas remained in the conference room. They sat in silence for a long moment, the magnitude of what had just happened settling over them. We did it, Sarah finally said. We actually did it. You did it? Lucas turned to face her. You spoke your truth. You didn't hide or minimize or apologize for surviving. You just stood there and showed them who you really are. We did it together, Sarah corrected. Your mother showing up, that wasn't an accident. No, Lucas smiled. She called me last night, said she had a few things to say to the board, and did I mind if she crashed our meeting? I told her I'd be honored. Sarah laughed, the sound watery with unshed tears. Your family is remarkable. Our family, Lucas said softly. If you'll have us. Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Rita. Ethan's asking about you, wants to know if you're okay. I told him you're fighting dragons and you're winning. Sarah showed Lucas the text, and they both smiled. Let's go get him from school, Lucas suggested. Take the rest of the day off. We earned it. They did exactly that. Picked up a surprised but delighted Ethan, who cheered when they told him the shortened version of what happened. took him to the lakefront where they bought ice cream despite the February chill and watched the waves crash against the shore. "Mom," Ethan asked, chocolate ice cream smeared on his chin, "does this mean Mr. Blackwood can keep being your boyfriend?" "Yeah, baby." Sarah wiped his face with a napkin. "Yeah, it does." "Good," Ethan grinned, "because he's really good at explaining fractions." That night, after Ethan was in bed, Sarah and Lucas sat on her worn couch and talked about the future. Really talked. About what came next, what they wanted, what scared them. "I want to do this right," Lucas said. "No rushing, no pressure, just us figuring it out together." "I want that too." Sarah leaned against him. "But I also want you to know, I'm not going to be easy. I'm going to have bad days where I don't trust that this is real, where I expect you to leave or change or reveal some hidden cruelty. Old habits die hard." "I know." Lucas kissed the top of her head. "And I'm going to have days where I freeze up, where my trauma kicks in and I can't function the way I want to, where I feel like I'm not man enough or brave enough or strong enough. Then we'll just have to remind each other," Sarah said. "Remind each other that we're enough, that we're trying, that love doesn't mean perfection, it means partnership." "Partnership," Lucas repeated. "I like that." They sat in comfortable silence, and Sarah felt something she'd never felt before. Peace. Not the absence of problems, but the presence of someone to face them with. Not the end of fear, but the courage to feel it and move forward anyway. 3 months passed in a blur of change. The lawsuit was dismissed when Danny Murphy was arrested for outstanding warrants in another state. The media attention faded as new stories took precedence, and Sarah and Lucas settled into a rhythm that felt both natural and miraculous. Sarah thrived at work. With Margaret gone and the board's support secured, she tackled projects with renewed confidence. Her ideas were heard, implemented, celebrated. She earned respect not through her connection to Lucas, but through her own merit. And that made all the difference. Lucas transformed too. He left the office by 6 most evenings. Started coaching Ethan's basketball team, despite his initial terror at managing a dozen chaotic 9-year-olds. Laughed more, smiled more, became the version of himself he'd always wanted to be. They started looking at houses together. Nothing too fast, nothing too serious, just exploring possibilities. What would it look like if they took this next step? What kind of space could hold both their dreams? They found it on a sunny April morning. A modest 3-bedroom house with a yard big enough for Ethan to play and garden space for Sarah to plant vegetables. A home office for Lucas with good light and quiet. A kitchen where family dinners could happen. A front porch where they could watch the neighborhood kids ride bikes. "It's perfect," Sarah breathed, standing in the empty living room and imagining their life here. "It needs work," Lucas said practically, but his eyes were bright with the same vision. "New roof. The kitchen needs updating. The back fence is leaning." "We could fix it together." Sarah took his hand. "Make it ours." They made an offer that afternoon. Started planning the renovations. Began building something neither had ever really had before. A home that felt like safety and possibility combined. Ethan's health improved steadily. With consistent medication and regular checkups, his asthma attacks became rare. He gained weight, grew taller, played harder. The transformation in him mirrored the transformation in Sarah. When you weren't constantly fighting just to breathe, you could finally live. Both Sarah and Lucas started therapy. Not couples therapy, though they'd do that too eventually, but individual work to process their respective traumas. Sarah worked on trusting. Lucas worked on his freeze response. They learned that healing wasn't linear, that some days were harder than others, but that showing up was what mattered. Sarah enrolled in an online business degree program, not because she needed the credentials anymore, but because she wanted the knowledge. Wanted to fill in the gaps that dropping out at 16 had left. Lucas helped her with the coursework, and their late-night study sessions became another form of intimacy. Family dinners became a tradition. Every other Sunday, they'd gather at Eleanor and James's home, or at Victoria and David's, or eventually at the new house once renovations were complete. Eleanor taught Sarah to cook dishes she'd never attempted before. James showed Lucas woodworking techniques for building Ethan's bookshelf. Victoria and Sarah became genuine friends, not just sisters-in-law-to-be, but women who understood each other's struggles and strengths. One evening in May, after a particularly chaotic basketball practice, where Lucas had somehow managed to settle a dispute between three arguing 9-year-olds, he asked Sarah to come to his apartment. He had something important to discuss. Sarah's heart jumped. Was this it? Was he going to propose? They talked about marriage in abstract terms, someday, eventually, when the time was right, but maybe the time was now. Lucas met her at the door looking nervous, more nervous than she'd seen him since that first board meeting. Come in, sit down, I need to talk to you about something. Sarah sat on his couch, trying to keep her expectations in check. Maybe it wasn't a proposal. Maybe it was something else entirely. I want to ask Ethan's permission, Lucas said without preamble. Before I propose to you, I want to ask him if it's okay, if he'd be comfortable with me becoming his stepfather, officially. Sarah's throat closed with emotion. Lucas. He deserves to have a say in this. Lucas sat beside her, taking her hands. This isn't just about you and me. It's about all three of us becoming a family, and I won't do that without his blessing. You're going to be an amazing father. Sarah's voice broke. You already are. That Saturday, while Sarah pretended to run errands, Lucas took Ethan to the park, just the two of them, shooting baskets and eating hot dogs and having what Lucas later described as the most important conversation of his life. Ethan, Lucas said, sitting on a bench while the boy bounced the basketball. I need to ask you something serious. Ethan stopped bouncing and came to sit beside him. Okay. I want to marry your mom. Lucas's voice was steady despite his nerves. But before I ask her, I need to know if that's okay with you. Because marrying her means becoming your stepdad, officially, and that's a big deal. So I'm asking you first, do I have your permission to propose to your mom? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his young face serious with thought. Finally, he looked up at Lucas with eyes that were too wise for 9 years old. Will you be my real dad, not just my stepdad? Lucas's heart cracked open. If you'll have me, I'd be honored to be your dad, real in every way that matters. Even when I'm annoying, Ethan asked. Mom says I ask too many questions, especially when you're annoying. Lucas smiled through the tears, threatening. That's what dads do. They answer a million questions and help with homework and show up for basketball games, even when they're tired. And you won't leave? The question was small, vulnerable, even when things get hard. Ethan, I can't promise that nothing will ever go wrong. Life is unpredictable, but I can promise that I won't leave just because things are difficult. I'll stay and we'll figure it out together. That's what family does. Ethan thought about this, bouncing the ball once, twice. Then he threw his arms around Lucas's neck and hugged him fiercely. Okay, you can marry Mom, and you can be my dad. Lucas held the boy tight. This child who'd stolen his heart as surely as his mother had, and felt something fundamental shift in his soul. He wasn't just falling in love with Sarah. He was falling in love with the life they could build together, the family they could become. Thank you, he whispered into Ethan's hair. Thank you for trusting me. When Lucas told Sarah later that evening what Ethan had said, they both cried. Happy tears, grateful tears, the kind of tears that came from being given something precious and fragile and worth protecting with everything you had. He wants you to be his dad, Sarah said, wonder in her voice. Not his stepdad, his dad. I want that too. Lucas pulled her close. More than I knew I could want anything. They stood in Sarah's tiny apartment, the space that had been her fortress and her prison, and planned the next chapter of their lives. The house was almost ready. The adoption papers would be filed after the wedding. Their family was forming piece by piece, choice by choice, day by day. Moving day arrived with spring sunshine and an army of helpers. Victoria and David brought their girls, who delighted in helping by playing in empty rooms and making forts out of boxes. Eleanor and James arrived with a truckload of furniture they'd been storing. Rita came with homemade sandwiches and endless encouragement. The house transformed over the course of a single day. Ethan's room got painted blue at his insistence, with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that Lucas carefully positioned to match real constellations. Sarah's kitchen, filled with the pots and pans Eleanor had saved from her own mother. Lucas's home office came together with the desk James had built by hand. By evening, exhausted but happy, they stood in the backyard looking at the space that would become Sarah's garden. "I'll plant tomatoes," Sarah said, pointing, "and herbs there by the kitchen door. Maybe some flowers along the fence. I'll build a playground." Lucas indicated the far corner. "Swings and a slide. Maybe a tree house if we can find the right tree. This is really ours." Sarah still couldn't quite believe it. "This house, this yard, this life. It's really ours." Lucas wrapped his arms around her from behind. All of it. They hosted their first family dinner a week later. The table Lucas had ordered online was too big for the dining room, but they made it work. Eleanor brought her famous pot roast. Victoria brought wine. James brought stories that made everyone laugh. Rita came with Ethan's favorite cookies. Even Father Miguel from the community center where Ethan played basketball stopped by to offer a blessing for the new home. Sarah looked around the table at the faces gathered there. Family by blood and family by choice, people who'd shown up for them, supported them, celebrated with them. This was wealth. This was what mattered. Not the size of the house or the price of the furniture, but the love contained within these walls. "I want to say something," Sarah said, standing with her wine glass. "A year ago, I was convinced I had to do everything alone, that depending on anyone was dangerous, that letting people in meant getting hurt." She looked at Lucas, at Ethan, at all the faces watching her. "You've all taught me something different. You've taught me that strength isn't just about fighting alone. It's about knowing when to let someone fight beside you." She raised her glass. "To family, the one we're born into and the one we choose. Thank you for choosing us." "To family," everyone echoed, and the sound of clinking glasses filled the room. Later, after everyone had left and Ethan was asleep in his new room, Sarah and Lucas stood in the backyard, looking at the space where her garden would grow. The evening was warm, promising summer, and fireflies were just beginning to emerge. "There's something I want to show you," Lucas said. He pulled out his phone and showed her architectural drawings. "For the playground. I was thinking we could add a little vegetable patch right there at kid height, so Ethan could learn to garden with you." Sarah studied the plans, her heart full. "It's perfect. You thought of everything." "Not quite everything." Lucas set down his phone and turned to face her. "But I'm hoping to fix that tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Sarah's pulse quickened. "Tomorrow." Lucas kissed her softly. "Wear something comfortable. We're going on a little adventure." He wouldn't say more than that, leaving Sarah to wonder and hope and dream about what tomorrow might bring. But as she fell asleep that night in their new house, in the bed they'd chosen together, with Ethan safe down the hall and Lucas beside her, Sarah felt something she'd never felt before. She felt home. Not the building, though she loved that too, but the sense of belonging, of being exactly where she was meant to be, of having people who stayed, who showed up, who fought beside her instead of against her. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But tonight, this moment, was perfect exactly as it was, and that, Sarah thought as sleep claimed her, was more than enough. The next morning, Sarah woke to find Lucas already up, standing in their backyard with his phone and a satisfied smile. When he saw her watching from the kitchen window, he quickly pocketed the phone and came inside. "Ready for our adventure?" he asked, kissing her good morning. "You're being very mysterious." Sarah poured coffee, studying him. "Should I be worried?" "Only if you don't like surprises." Lucas's eyes sparkled with something that looked like barely contained excitement. "Get dressed. Wear something comfortable. We're picking up Ethan and heading out." An hour later, they pulled up to the house to find Ethan waiting on the front porch, practically vibrating with anticipation. He'd clearly been in on whatever secret Lucas was keeping. "Finally!" Ethan bounded to the car. "I've been waiting forever." "It's been 20 minutes, Sarah laughed. "Where are we going?" "You'll see," both Lucas and Ethan said in unison, then grinned at each other like conspirators. They drove through Chicago's suburbs, heading north, and Sarah watched the landscape change from city to countryside. Finally, they turned down a long driveway and pulled up to their new house, except it looked different somehow. There were cars in the driveway. Eleanor's sedan, Victoria's SUV, and was that Rita's old Honda? "What's going on?" Sarah asked as Lucas parked. "Come see." He took her hand, and Ethan grabbed the other, and together they walked her around to the backyard. Sarah stopped short, her breath catching in her throat. The yard had been transformed. Someone had planted flowers everywhere, hundreds of them, creating a carpet of color. And in the center, spelled out in bright yellow tulips against white daisies, were two words, "Marry me." Lucas knelt beside her, Ethan right next to him, both of them looking up at her with identical expressions of hope and love and nervous anticipation. "Sarah Miller," Lucas began, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "6 months ago, you saved me from a bar fight. But that was just the beginning. Every day since then, you've been saving me in ways I didn't even know I needed. You've taught me that courage comes in many forms, that strength isn't about never being afraid, it's about choosing love anyway, that the best kind of family is the one you build together." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a simple, elegant diamond ring. "I'm asking you to marry me, to let me be your partner in every way, to build a life together where nobody has to fight alone." Then Ethan, clearly having practiced his part, spoke up. "And I want to ask you something too, Mom. Can Lucas be my dad? For real. Not just my stepdad, but my actual dad." Sarah's vision blurred with tears. She looked at her son, this brave, beautiful boy who'd never had a father and was choosing one now. And she looked at Lucas, this man who'd been terrified of his own shadow and had learned to stand in the light. And she felt her heart crack open with so much love she thought she might burst. "Yes." The word came out broken, joyful. "Yes, to both of you. Yes to everything." Lucas slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands, and then he was pulling her down into an embrace that included Ethan, the three of them holding each other and crying and laughing all at once. Applause erupted from the house, and Sarah looked up to see Eleanor, James, Victoria, David, the girls, and Rita all standing on the back porch, clapping and cheering and crying along with them. "You knew," Sarah called to Rita. "Baby, everyone knew." Rita wiped her eyes. "Lucas has been planning this for weeks, even got me to help pick the flowers." The rest of the day passed in a blur of celebration. Eleanor had prepared a feast. Victoria had brought champagne. James had captured the whole proposal on video, sneaking around the corner of the house to record it, and Ethan, their son, spent the afternoon showing everyone his ring, a simple silver band Lucas had given him that matched Lucas's own. "So we're all official now," Ethan explained importantly to his cousins. "Lucas is my dad and Mom's husband-to-be." That evening, after everyone had left and Ethan was in bed, Sarah and Lucas sat on their back porch looking at the flower proposal. Tomorrow they'd transplant most of them to create Sarah's permanent garden. But tonight they just wanted to look at this beautiful, ephemeral declaration of love. "I can't believe you did all this," Sarah said, holding up her hand to watch the ring catch the moonlight. "I had help." Lucas pulled her close. "But I meant every word. Sarah, I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you're worth staying for, worth fighting for, worth everything." "You already have proven it." Sarah turned in his arms to face him. "Every single day, every time you show up, every time you choose us, every time you're patient with my walls and my fears and my terrible cooking." "Your cooking's getting better," Lucas smiled. "Mom's been teaching you." "She's been trying," Sarah laughed. "But you know what? I don't care if I ever master pot roast. I don't care if I never learn all the social rules or fit perfectly into your world, because I finally understand what you've been trying to tell me all along. It's not about fitting in, it's about belonging, and I belong with you. We belong together." They sat in comfortable silence, and Sarah thought about the sealed envelope she'd opened all those months ago. The letter that had changed everything. Lucas had been right to make her wait. Right to understand that she needed to arrive at that moment of trust on her own terms, in her own time. "When should we get married?" Lucas asked. "I'm thinking soon, but whatever you want." "June," Sarah said immediately, "in this backyard. With everyone we love, nothing fancy, just us." "June it is." Lucas kissed her softly. "I can't wait to marry you, Sarah Miller." "Soon to be Sarah Blackwood," she murmured against his lips. "Or Sarah Miller Blackwood. I haven't decided yet." "Whatever makes you happy." Lucas pulled her closer. "As long as I get to call you my wife." The next 2 months flew by in a whirlwind of planning. Sarah had never dreamed of a big wedding, and Lucas had no desire for one either, so they kept it simple, small, intimate, just family and close friends in their backyard. Eleanor helped Sarah find a dress, a simple ivory sheath that made her feel elegant without being uncomfortable. Victoria organized the flowers, keeping it casual and natural. Rita coordinated the food, insisting on cooking most of it herself with Eleanor's help. And James built an arch for the ceremony, simple wood draped in climbing roses. Ethan took his role as ring-bearer very seriously, practicing walking slowly and carrying the pillow without dropping it approximately 500 times. "Mom, what if I trip?" He worried the night before the wedding. "Then you get up and keep walking," Sarah said, tucking him into bed. "But baby, you won't trip, and even if you did, it wouldn't matter. What matters is that tomorrow we become a real family, officially, you, me, and Lucas." "Dad," Ethan corrected with a shy smile. "I'm going to call him Dad tomorrow. Is that okay?" Sarah's throat closed up. "That's more than okay. That's perfect." The wedding day arrived with perfect June weather, clear blue skies, gentle breeze, warm but not too hot. Sarah got ready in their bedroom with Rita and Victoria helping. And for once, she felt beautiful. Not because of the dress or the makeup or any of that, but because of the joy radiating from her own face in the mirror. "You look happy," Victoria said softly. "Really, truly happy." "I am." Sarah touched her reflection, almost surprised to recognize herself. "I never thought I could be this happy. I didn't think I deserved it." "You deserve everything good in this world." Rita squeezed her shoulders. "And that man down there, he knows it. We all know it. Now you just need to believe it too." The ceremony was small, only about 30 people gathered in their backyard. Father Miguel from the community center had agreed to officiate, and he stood under James's beautiful wooden arch, waiting as the music started. Ethan walked down the makeshift aisle first, carrying the rings with intense concentration. Then the bridesmaids, Victoria and Rita, both glowing with happiness. And finally, Sarah. She'd chosen to walk alone. Not because she had no one to give her away, but because after a lifetime of standing on her own, she wanted to walk into this marriage on her own 2 feet, choosing it, choosing him, choosing this family they were building together. But as she started down the aisle, she saw someone standing at the back of the gathering, a woman in a simple blue dress, grey hair pulled back, face older than Sarah remembered, but unmistakably familiar. Her mother, Patricia. She'd come. Sarah's steps faltered for just a moment, and their eyes met. Patricia's face was uncertain, asking permission, hoping for forgiveness, and Sarah, her heart so full of love and second chances and new beginnings, nodded slightly, acknowledging her, accepting her presence, not forgetting the past, but choosing not to let it define the future. Then Sarah's eyes found Lucas at the front, and everything else faded away. He stood there in a simple grey suit, Ethan beside him in a matching outfit, both of them watching her approach with identical expressions of wonder and love. When she reached them, Lucas took her hands, and Father Miguel began, "We gather today to celebrate the union of Sarah and Lucas and the formation of a family, not just a marriage, but a commitment to build something beautiful together. Sarah, Lucas, and Ethan, you've each walked difficult paths to arrive at this moment, and now you're choosing to walk the rest of the path together." The ceremony was short, sweet, and deeply personal. They'd written their own vows, and when it was Lucas's turn to speak, his voice was strong and clear. "Sarah, I promise to be your partner in everything, to fight beside you, not for you, to celebrate your strength while offering mine, to be the father Ethan deserves, to build a home where everyone feels safe, loved, and valued. I promise to choose you every single day for the rest of my life." Sarah's vows came from her heart. "Lucas, you taught me that strength isn't about fighting alone, that accepting help isn't weakness but wisdom, that love doesn't make you vulnerable, it makes you brave. I promise to trust you, to believe in us, to build this life together. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your wife. And I promise that Ethan and I will never take for granted the gift of having you in our lives." When Father Miguel pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss was tender and sweet and full of promise. But what made Sarah cry was what happened next. Ethan stepped forward, and Lucas knelt down to his level. "Ethan, I want to make you a promise too. I promise to be the best dad I can be, to show up for your games and help with your homework, and listen when you need to talk. I promise to love you and your mom with everything I have. You're my son now, in every way that matters." Ethan threw his arms around Lucas's neck. "I love you, Dad." The crowd erupted in applause and tears, and Sarah pulled both of them into a hug. This family they'd created from broken pieces and brave choices and stubborn hope. The reception was perfect in its imperfection. The food was delicious, but served on mismatched plates because they'd underestimated how many they'd need. The music was a playlist Lucas had made himself, a mix of songs that meant something to them. The cake was slightly lopsided because Rita had baked it herself and refused to let anyone help. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the laughter, the love, the sense that everyone gathered here was genuinely happy for them. Victoria pulled Sarah aside during the dancing. "I owe you an apology. When Lucas first told me about you, I was skeptical, protective. I thought he was making a mistake." "And now," Sarah asked, "now I know I was wrong. You're exactly what he needed, what he deserves, and I'm proud to call you my sister." Victoria hugged her tight. "Welcome to the family, officially." Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Patricia approached Sarah hesitantly. "I know I don't have the right to be here, but Eleanor called me, told me you were getting married, and I wanted to see you happy, to know that you found what I couldn't." Sarah looked at this woman who'd given birth to her but hadn't been able to mother her, and she felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. "I'm glad you came. Thank you. You look beautiful and happy, and I'm proud of you." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry I wasn't the mother you needed. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry for all of it." "I know." Sarah touched her mother's hand briefly. "Maybe someday we can talk. Really talk. Build something new. But for today, I'm just glad you're here to see this." It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a door left open, a possibility for the future, and that felt right. As the last guest departed and Ethan fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from excitement, Lucas and Sarah stood in their backyard, looking at the remnants of their wedding. Flowers scattered by dancing feet, empty champagne glasses, the arch still standing, roses glowing in the moonlight. "We did it," Sarah said softly. "We're married. We're a family," Lucas corrected, pulling her close. "The three of us. Official and legal and permanent." They carried Ethan to bed together, both of them tucking him in, both of them kissing his forehead, their son, their sweet, brave boy who'd given them permission to love each other. In their own room, as Sarah hung up her wedding dress and Lucas removed his tie, they caught each other's eyes in the mirror and smiled. This was it. This was the life they'd built. Not perfect, but theirs. "I love you," Sarah said, the words coming easier now after months of practice. "I love you too." Lucas pulled her close. "Thank you for saying yes, for choosing me, for choosing us." "Always," Sarah promised, "for the rest of our lives." 3 months passed in the sweet rhythm of married life. Sarah kept her name at work, Sarah Miller, but became Sarah Blackwood everywhere else. Lucas's adoption of Ethan was finalized in August, complete with a small courthouse ceremony where Ethan officially became Ethan Miller Blackwood. The joy on both their faces in the official photo was something Sarah would treasure forever. September arrived with the kind of gentle autumn that made Chicago magical. Golden leaves and crisp air, and the promise of cozy evenings ahead. Sarah had finished her first semester of business courses with straight A's. Lucas had hired 2 new partners to share his workload, finally accepting that he couldn't and shouldn't do everything himself. And Ethan had grown 2 inches over the summer, suddenly all gangly limbs and growing appetite. Saturday morning arrived with the chaos of family life. Lucas attempted to make pancakes, burned the first batch, and had everyone laughing at his earnest attempts to recreate Eleanor's perfect recipe. Ethan helped by reading the recipe out loud and adding far too much vanilla. Sarah supervised from the kitchen table, drinking coffee and feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. This ordinary, messy, beautiful morning, this was everything she'd never dared to want. "Okay, round 2, Lucas announced, pouring more batter. "This time they'll be perfect." They weren't perfect, but they were edible and covered in enough syrup. Nobody cared. "Big game today," Ethan said through a mouthful of pancake. "Championship. Coach says we might actually win this year." "We'll definitely win this year," Lucas corrected with the biased certainty of a proud father. "You've been practicing that free throw." They arrived at the community center gym to find it packed. Eleanor and James had driven in from Martha's Vineyard. Victoria and David brought the girls. Rita came with her sister. Even some of Sarah's old co-workers from the Rusty Anchor showed up, having heard about the big game. Sarah watched from the stands as Lucas coached, directing 9- and 10-year-olds with patience and enthusiasm. Watched Ethan play with confidence she'd never seen before, calling plays and encouraging teammates. This child who'd once struggled to breathe was now running, laughing, thriving. The game came down to the final seconds. Ethan had the ball. The score was tied. Sarah's heart was in her throat as he dribbled, focused, and shot. The ball sailed through the air in what felt like slow motion, hit the backboard, bounced on the rim, and dropped through the net. The crowd erupted. Ethan's team swarmed him. Lucas jumped up and down like his own 9-year-old, and Sarah cried happy tears into Rita's shoulder. When Ethan broke free from his celebrating teammates, he ran straight to the stands. To Sarah and Lucas, who'd climbed down to meet him. He launched himself at both of them, and they caught him in a 3-way hug. "Did you see? Did you see?" Ethan's words tumbled over each other. "I made the shot. We won." "We saw, baby. We saw everything." Sarah kissed his sweaty forehead. "We're so proud of you." "You were amazing, son." Lucas ruffled his hair. "That shot was perfect." The word son landed between them with weight and beauty. Ethan beamed up at Lucas, at this man who'd chosen to be his father, and Sarah saw her son's whole world in that smile. They celebrated with ice cream at their favorite shop, the whole family crowding around tables pushed together, talking over each other and laughing and making too much noise. Sarah looked around at these faces, these people who'd become her tribe, and felt something click into place. This was what family looked like. Not the trauma and dysfunction she'd grown up with, not the loneliness of doing everything alone, but this: connection, support, joy shared and burdens lightened, love multiplied instead of divided. That evening, after everyone had gone home and the excitement had settled, Sarah and Lucas followed their nightly routine of tucking Ethan into bed. He was still buzzing with adrenaline, recounting every play of the game. And then Jackson passed to me, and I thought, this is it, this is the moment. And I remembered what you taught me, Dad, about following through, and I did it. Ethan's eyes were bright with pride. "You did it," Lucas agreed. "You were brave when it counted." "Like Mum was brave when she saved you at the bar," Ethan said. "And like you were brave when you stood up to the board for Mum. We're all brave, right? In different ways." Sarah's throat closed up. This child, this wise, observant, beautiful child who saw the world with such clarity. "Exactly right," she managed. "We're all brave in our own ways." "Tell me the story again," Ethan requested, settling into his pillows. "About how you met, about the envelope, about how you became a family." It was a story they'd told dozens of times, but Sarah never tired of it. "Your dad came into the bar where I was working, and a bad man tried to hurt him," Ethan continued, knowing it by heart. "And your mom saved me." Lucas picked up the thread. "Without even thinking about it. She just stepped in and protected me." "And then you gave her a job and the envelope," Ethan said, "and she didn't open it for a long time because she was scared." "I was terrified," Sarah admitted. "Terrified of trusting anyone, of believing good things could happen to me. But you opened it eventually," Ethan yawned, "and it said you didn't have to fight alone anymore." "It did." Lucas stroked Ethan's hair as his eyes drooped. "And your mom realized she could let people help her, let people love her." "And then you became my dad," Ethan murmured, sleep claiming him, "and we all lived happily ever after." Sarah and Lucas sat with him until his breathing deepened and evened out. Then they tiptoed out, leaving his door cracked open the way he liked it, nightlight glowing softly. In their own room, they got ready for bed in comfortable silence. Sarah brushed her teeth while Lucas set the alarm. He hung up his jacket while she turned down the bed. The domestic choreography of shared life, but before they climbed into bed, Sarah paused by the dresser where they'd placed a frame. Inside it, carefully preserved, was the letter Lucas had written all those months ago, the envelope that had changed everything. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked. "Writing that letter before you knew what would happen between us?" "Never." Lucas came to stand beside her, looking at his own handwriting. "I meant every word then. I mean every word now. You're worth fighting for, Sarah. You always were." "We're worth fighting for." Sarah corrected gently. All three of us. They stood looking at the letter. This artifact of hope and vulnerability, and the courage it took to offer your heart without knowing if it would be accepted. I'm glad I waited to open it, Sarah said finally. I'm glad I didn't open it until I was ready, until I could really hear what you were saying. I'm glad you opened it at all. Lucas pulled her close. I'm glad you took the risk. Glad you let me in. They climbed into bed, and Lucas turned off the light. In the darkness, Sarah felt Lucas's hand find hers, their fingers intertwining with the ease of practice. Lucas, she whispered. Thank you for not giving up on me, for being patient, for showing me that not everyone leaves. Thank you for staying, Lucas whispered back, for fighting for us, for teaching me what real courage looks like. They lay in the quiet of their home, their son sleeping down the hall, their life spread out before them full of possibility and promise. And Sarah thought about that night at the Rusty Anchor, a lifetime ago, when she'd stepped between a stranger and danger without hesitation. She hadn't known she was saving herself that night, hadn't known she was taking the first step toward a future she couldn't even imagine, hadn't known that broken bottle and fierce determination would lead her here, to this bed, this man, this family, this peace. But looking back now, she could see it. The thread that connected that moment to this one, the journey from fighting alone to standing together, from walls built for protection to doors opened for connection, from survival to actually living. The moonlight filtered through their bedroom window, casting soft shadows. Outside, the city hummed with its late-night rhythm, but inside their home, everything was still, peaceful, right. Sarah squeezed Lucas's hand, and he squeezed back, a simple gesture that said everything. I'm here, you're here, we're here together, and neither of them would ever have to fight alone again. In the morning, they would wake to Ethan's laughter and burnt toast and the beautiful chaos of family life. There would be homework to help with and bills to pay and small arguments about whose turn it was to do the dishes. There would be hard days and easy days and everything in between. But tonight, in this moment, there was only gratitude. Gratitude for second chances, for brave choices, for the courage to be vulnerable, for the wisdom to accept help, for the love that transforms us into better versions of ourselves. Sarah fell asleep wrapped in her husband's arms, in the house they'd chosen together, with their son safe down the hall. She fell asleep knowing that tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but they'd face them together. That the walls she'd spent a lifetime building had become windows, letting light in and allowing her to finally see clearly. She fell asleep understanding, at last, what the envelope had been trying to teach her all along. That even the strongest warriors deserve an army beside them. That accepting partnership doesn't diminish strength, it multiplies it. That love, real love, isn't about perfect people or perfect circumstances. It's about imperfect people choosing each other day after day, despite the fear and doubt and old wounds. That family isn't just who you're born to, it's who shows up, who stays, who fights beside you instead of against you. And that sometimes, when you're brave enough to open the envelope, to take the risk, to trust despite everything life has taught you about trust, sometimes you find exactly what you needed all along. Sometimes you find home. And Sarah Miller Blackwood, former bartender, survivor, warrior, mother, wife, had finally found hers. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.